So I thank at the outset the organizers and the Moroccan Institute for the Global South. And I'm sure that the conference platform shall be able to disseminate the current prevailing and contemporary ideas about the understanding of the Global South to various quarters of the world. We are living in a very interesting times where the idea of the global south has been acquiring quite momentum, and the global south is being also discussed and being looked upon as a kind of uh, force that is to be reckoned with, and the global south is organizing itself in a new and interesting ways. So to understand the evolution of the global south that we are living in at the moment, and of course the with reference to the dynamics of geopolitics in the contemporary world, we have to also understand the idea of the Bandung spirit, where from the idea of solidarity of first Africa and Asia comes in, and then of course with the independence of the newly with the independence of the colonized countries over a period of time, the idea mutates and evolves into a kind of a larger understanding, which we in the contemporary times know as global south. So as the conference is completely focusing on the idea of Bandung spirit and its relevance in the contemporary context of the global south, I'm trying to trace the the reflections or the idea of the spirit and its evolution over a period of time. And there have been three conferences, importantly speaking, in Bandung. First in 1955, second 2005, and third in 2015. And there have been documents produced in these three conferences, which will be guiding my understanding of or has guided my understanding of the evolution of the Bandung spirit with changing times and changing geopolitics. And also, then I'll be trying to locate India and Africa relationship in the discourse of the Asianism, Afro-Asianism, and also its relationship with the global South. So, so this is the outline of my presentation, divided into different parts. The first is the classical Afro-Asian construct, how it originated, its evaluation, and then its evolution into different concepts and different kinds of phrases during the Cold War, during the era of globalization, and in 21st century, and that also of its kind of implementation in the materialization of Africa-India relations, and also in the framing of India-Africa relations through the 21st century. So starting with the basic and the fundamentals of the Afro-Asian construct, which emerged in its um, uh, kind of materialized form in the Bandung Conference 1955. So the idea of Afro-Asianism, Bandung spirit, was an idea which was anti-imperial, anti-colonial, anti-racial in nature. And the nations of both Africa and Asia were looking forward to get rid of the phenomenons that we have just referred to. It was also striving for the independence of oppressed nations and that of the the discourses of annihilation through war in the nuclear cloud that was still lingering in 1955 after the end of the Second World War with the uh, bombing of Nagasaki and Hiroshima in Japan. So the idea of Afro-Asianism was kind of idea which wedded both the security, peace, and economic ideas for the prosperity of the world together. And the larger canopy under which these ideas were structured was that of the world peace. So Afro-Asian construct was talking about primarily economic justice and world peace in the background of nuclear war, as well as of the oppression of and exploitation of the colonies by the imperial and colonial nations. So Bandung Conference was organized in April 1955 from 18th to 24th day, and it was organized by a certain uh, group of newly independent countries of Burma, India, Indonesia, Pakistan, and Sri Lanka, and was attended by 6 African and 18 Asian nations. So in the background of the whole Bandung Conference was anti-imperialism and nuclear debates, uh, uh, and the ideas of economic justice and world peace. I'm coming to the statements and the speeches of the Bandung Conference, primarily speaking the speech made by President of Indonesia in the opening of the conference, where he actually highlighted the concerns of the Bandung spirit. Uh, he was talking about the independence of nations and anti-colonialism. He said no people can feel themselves free so long as part of their motherland is unfree. Like peace, freedom is indivisible. There is no such thing as being half free, as there is no such thing as being half alive. He also warned against complacency with the attainment of political independence of the colonized nations. And he said, we are often told colonialism is dead. And also said that let us not be deceived or even soothed by this idea that colonialism is dead. He hinted to the persistence of colonialism and said that uh, the world must not think of colonialism only in the parts of Asia and Africa. Colonialism has also its modern dress in the form of economic control, intellectual control, actual physical control by small but alien community within a nation. So the idea of neo-colonialism was lingering in his mind when he made this statement uh, and called for taking steps to identify such lingering of colonialism in its new forms and manifestations. President Sukarno also highlighted that conflict doesn't come from variety of skins nor from variety of religion, but it comes from variety of interests or desires to say. So he was quite uh, uh, willing to say that the differences or diversities do not in themselves are responsible for conflicts that are there around, but our own interests and political desires as such. So there was a scope of management of the diversities towards peace in his opinion from this statement. He also said, all of us, I'm certain, are united by more important things than those which superficially divide us. We are united, for instance, by a common detestation of colonialism in whatever form it appears. We are united by a common detestation of racialism, and we are united by a common determination to preserve and destabilize peace in the world. So he was articulating the ideas and the desire and the yearning of the oppressed nations of those times. And regarding the nuclear threat, he said that today the world is more black. War would not only mean a threat to our independence, it may mean the end of civilization and even of human life. And the military planning of nations is on that basis. So he actually warned the humankind and said that the nations are actually planning on the idea of the annihilation of humankind with nuclear war. So nuclear war was a big threat. So we must avoid. And he was also looking towards solutions to avoid these kinds of situations, and was quite aware of the political and economic and military conditions of the newly independent nations as well. He said, what can we do? The peoples of Asia and Africa wield little physical power. Even their economic strength is dispersed and slight. So he was fully aware of the weak situation and conditions of the newly independent nations. However, was kind of optimistic about the steps that could be taken for the betterment of the world. He still said that we can do much together as we can inject the voice of reason into world affairs. So, means responding to the call of voice of reason, call for the voice of reason, the Declaration of Bandung focused on economic, cultural, and political cooperation. The political cooperation covered a wide range of issues like human rights, self-determination, problems of dependent people, promotion of world peace. Bandung Declaration, therefore, responding to the calls made by President Sukarno and, of course, the other prominent leadership of the organizing countries, came up with 10 principles that continue even today to inspire many declarations in our own present times as well as uh, the future to come with reference to Afro-Asianism. So what are these 10 principles for friendly cooperation? These principles focus on human rights, respect for sovereignty and territorial integrity, equality of all races, equality of all nations, and abstention from intervention or interference in internal affairs of another country. Respect for the right of each nation to defend itself singly or collectively have been acknowledged and, of course, been accepted in the declaration. The declaration also talked about the countries, advised, in fact, the countries to abstain from the politics of big powers, also to abstain from exerting pressure on other countries, and also refrain from acts or threats of aggression or the use of force against territorial integrity of other countries. The idea of the declaration was that in future the countries will be focusing on the settlement of international disputes by peaceful means. And finally, the declaration was about respect for international justice and international obligations, ultimately saying rule of law in global governance. So that is how the formulation of the Bandung spirit, the emergence of Bandung spirit happens in 1955 with the declaration itself, which however evolves with the changing conditions, geopolitical conditions in the world, from colonialism to Cold War. So in the Cold War, of course, by 1955, the Cold War had already started, was already declared. The blocs were already in shape. And therefore, the Bandung Conference was being eagerly monitored by so-called Western and colonial nations very keenly. So Afro-Asian construct, although started from anti-colonialism, transited to the idea of non-alignment in the Cold War period, which was not limited to the two continents only. Of course, the Afro-Asian spirit was in the core, or you can say was kind of seed which led to the growth of the idea of non-alignment, which expanded even to the other continents like Latin America, and the other parts of Asia as well. The Afro-Asian political construct culminated uh, during the Cold War in the idea of non-alignment and, of course, the Third World solidarity, going beyond even the continents of Africa and Asia, which, of course, transformed during the Cold War period as a new Afro-Asian uh, uh, and new Afro-Asianism. And in that period, which comes after the end of the Cold War, the idea of third world solidarity and non-alignment started losing its currency and were gradually replaced by general category defined as developing countries, which were further categorized in different uh, subcategories to say. The focus in the post-Cold War period was not just Africa or Asia, but also the developing, underdeveloped, and least developing countries of other continents, thereby giving rise to the idea of the global South. So, the uh, movement that started from Afro-Asianism transformed into third world solidarity, which later transformed into the idea of the global south, which has of course transited into our own contemporary times, and we discuss about it as kind of a stabilizing factor in the uh, geopolitical contestations that are happening between the great powers in the contemporary times. So, so post for Cold War period is known for economic integration and interdependence expanding with the ideology of neoliberalism, and of course thereby transitioning into the era of globalization. So, so that liberalization and the transformation of Afro-Asianism, expansion of the Afro-Asianism that happened post the end of the Cold War period uh, uh, comes into the era of the globalization, which can be identified economic globalization to be specific, which comes till the from the which started in fact from the end of the last decade of the 20th century, where and in those where the African and Asian countries were completely free from the phenomenon and the processes of colonialism in those times. So, so the discourse with the independence of all the African and Asian countries transited to economic development and growth primarily rather than anti-colonialism or anti-imperialism as such. However, neo-colonialism was still under discussion and was considered as to be a new manifestation of the classical colonialism in the form of debt trap and dependence on the erstwhile colonial and imperial countries of the newly independent states. So, with the loosening of the ideological pressures, the nations of Africa and Asia came closer again in the era of the economic globalization, uh, where common issues were protecting their interests in the world with reference to their global economic and political order. So geographical proximity of Africa and Asia and economic conditions of economic globalization pushed them to think again in terms of Asia-Africa cooperation in fora like the WTO. Then after we started looking at the group of G77 and the group of developing countries forming kind of pressure groups within the bodies like WTO and UN negotiations and climate change negotiations at different platforms. Together, the Asian and African countries had the number, both in terms of states and population, in the UN and the WTO. So I started discussing with the Afro-Asian idea. However, this was later on supported by the countries from developing countries from other parts of the world. So here, by this time, when economic globalization is happening, so the Afro-Asianism has completely transformed into a larger body or larger idea that is of the global South. So here in WTO and different UN platforms, in climate change negotiations, and in G20, the larger global, the larger idea of the global South is functional, which of course emerged and transformed and evolved through Afro-Asianism. But since Bandung conference, the Afro-Asian solidarity faced several questions. So it was not without disputation. Given the dynamics of Cold War and the newly independent nations' economic and political dependence on the leaders in either the communist or the capitalist bloc. So these questions always remained and keep perturbing those advocating for the Afro-Asian solidarity or the Global South solidarity. Afro-Asia in 21st century, with the intensification of the neoliberal globalization, became obsolete in its classical sense. Racism, colonialism lost their mainstream legal and discursive legitimacy. Asia also saw tremendous economic growth post-Cold War. Asian giants like India and China started taking lead among the developing economies. And of course, they started being counted among the rising powers or the emerging economies. These have been disputed nowadays, which we may talk about when there are questions and answers session happening in any of the live sessions that are upcoming. So leading political and economic institutions like the UN, IMF, and World Bank project Asia as the economic powerhouse of the 21st century. And Africa is also projected by these institutions to be following the Asian growth story, and the next growth story shall be happening in Africa, as per the projections. The future of both the developed and underdeveloped world now depends on the resources, economies, and people of these two continents. The Asian African Summit, these two continents. And that's why we need to know how in the contemporary times, in the 20th century, the Afro-Asian idea has integrated with the global South and in what form. So to identify that, we have to look into the important conferences that had happened in 2005 and 2015, wherefrom we can chart the Afro-Asian 21st century idea, 21st century idea of Afro-Asianism. So these two conferences were held in Bandung, Indonesia, to commemorate the first Bandung conference and celebrate its golden jubilee and the 60th anniversary respectively. 2005 declaration was about current global situation and the prevailing condition in Asia and Africa. It also necessitated the need to actively pursue a common view and collective action to ensure the equitable sharing of the benefits of globalization, and also pointed out to the traditional dominance of erstwhile colonial powers even in our contemporary times. So the different Afro-Asianism that we are talking about not only is about the developed world, but also the Asian rising powers who are independently engaging Africa for their future. So what we see that the powers like India, China, and Japan are engaging Africa, and they can all and on that basis, on the basis of this engagement, Africa can also diversify its relationship of dependence on the so-called Western world. The new Afro-Asianism is different in the sense that it is looking forward to practical and sustainable engagements with each other and solutions that are led and driven by themselves. So 2005 declaration had a kind of a futuristic perspective, which uh, is looking towards new issues and development of new agenda under the canopy of Afro-Asianism, of course, contributing to the discourses of global South. Here, then we can talk about the document that was produced in 2015, which started, which in fact uh, resolved to strengthening the role and capacity of regional and sub-regional organization in the two continents of Africa and Asia, where uh, uh, the disputes will be settled by peaceful means, where conflict prevention and resolution uh, will be the approach to uh, uh, discuss and negotiate by promoting political stability as well as supporting efforts in peacekeeping, post-conflict reconstruction, and peace building in the two regions. Of course, that will all come through enhanced regional South-South and triangular cooperation in accordance with the principles of impartiality, consent of parties, national ownership, and leadership. So it's a kind of a mutually beneficial approach that is being envisaged, or that was envisaged in the 2015 document, Bandung document. Uh, the 2015 Bandung document also rejected the view that the world economic problems can only be solved by World Bank, IMF, and ADB. It is an outdated view for the new Afro-Asian construct. It also pushed for a reform for the global financial architecture to eliminate the domination of one group of countries over other countries. So this is the latest form which comes of Afro-Asianism, which comes up in the 2015 summit document of the conference of Bandung, that is also known as 2015 Bandung Summit. So now we can see, as I had said in the beginning itself, India-Africa relations in the context of the evolution of the idea of the Bandung spirit. Here I have mentioned from Pandit Jawaharlal Nehru, first Prime Minister of India's statement, which reflects on the key issues that he was concerned of in 1959. And his primary emphasis was on avoiding blockism, and when we look at the languages of Sukarno and Nehru, they were quite similar in terms of their concerns, but the emphasis were a bit different. Nehru highlighted security dimensions first and then the economic dimensions, while Sukarno was primarily talking about the economic dimensions first, and then he was focusing on security. But both were agreeing on the larger agenda that the global, the Afro-Asianism had to take, and of course, thereby later on contributing to the discourses of the global South. There is a qualitative and scalar change, however, in India's engagement with Africa in the 21st century. So initial focus was bit narrow, of course, which was corresponding to the weak status of the countries or newly independent countries in those time. With the emergence of India, China, and several other countries in the global South, the nature of engagement of these countries have changed. And specifically speaking of India, India also has changed its relationship with Africa on it and has scaled up its engagement. So post-Cold War liberalization growth both enabled and compelled India to look towards Africa more actively. So in the conditions of liberalization, India was compelled to look towards Africa more, and it framed its Africa policy accordingly. So India's framing of Africa policy is a long-term policy for 21st century, which is based on mutual bilateral needs and aspirations, which is driven by the need of natural resources, energy, food security, of course, on both sides, rightful voice in global order, institution and negotiation. So both Africa and India, they are looking towards changes in global order and institutions and the reforms that are essential to be made in these institutions and in the global order itself, and the style of negotiations also. So securing economic and political interests in global institutions is a common goal for both India and the Africa as a continent. India has engaged Africa through India-Africa Forum Summits since 2008, and there have been three important summits. Of course, India-Africa Forum Summit 1, 2, and 3. India-Africa Forum Summit 3 reiterated India's commitment to further enhance Africa-India relations in the political, economic, and socio-cultural domains based on the principles of mutuality, complementarity, and true sense of solidarity, as well as the promotion of people-to-people interaction. So mutuality is quite an important thing in India's engagement with Africa. So it focuses on mutual needs. And also, the engagement talks about the fulfillment of the Agenda 2030, and of course, India aligns its policy with Africa 2063 agenda as well by reaffirming uh, uh, its commitment for a comprehensive reform of the United Nations systems, including its Security Council, to make it more regionally representative, democratic, accountable, and effective. So India wants to cooperate with Africa, both economic and political and global governance domain by synchronizing with Africa's Agenda 2063. So the focus is now on industry, infrastructure, economy, education, skill development, health, peace, security, and multilateral fora, while the two sides are engaging with each other. So when we look at 21st century Afro-Asianism and India-Africa, we see that both the sides are trying to avoid the colonial trap, the geopolitics of the contemporary times, where competition is there between rising powers, specifically speaking between India and China. And there's a kind of an internal competition in Asia as compared to internal competition in Asia rather than being imposed from outside the region. So from the geopolitical dynamics and the evolution that we has looked at in the Afro-Asianism in history, which also contributes to the discussions and discourses of the global South, we can conclude certain points. And these points we can say that Afro-Asian construct is largely forgotten in the geopolitical narratives of the great power competition within Asia. So the geopolitical is remembered more rather than the solidarity that we used to talk about. India and China, in fact, given their economic might and given their military power, would largely determine the viability of the 21st century Afro-Asian construct. So how fruitful and how effective the Afro-Asian construct is going to be shall be dependent on the dynamics between the two countries. And I understand that at the moment, both India and China are keeping an eye on the larger goal of the Afro-Asian or the global South, and thereby cooperating on the fields and agenda of common interest still. So that gives kind of a hope to the Asian and the African countries to cooperate further. India also has chosen and initiated a three-tier frame of engagement with Africa, but which is out of the Afro-Asian narrative, interestingly. Uh, I don't know what are the exact reasons, but the three-tier framework of India's cooperation with Africa, which in fact is in correspondence with the 2000 of 2005 Bandung document as well as 2015 Bandung summit, is not much highlighted in the narrative, which needs to be, in fact, put in front and highlighted uh, for its uh, prudence and for its wisdom. Narrative harmonization of the bilateral frames of both India and China, in fact, in the contemporary geopolitics, becomes a challenge which needs to be addressed for further realization of the Afro-Asian solidarity and the larger agenda of the global South. The Afro-Asian construct, of course, we have seen the later part of the earlier part of the presentation as well, that it has been challenged by prevailing geopolitical divisions, both due to internal and external divisions, which need to be resolved. There are external powers also influencing the Afro-Asian construct and its dynamics. However, it still works, and it has worked to the benefit of the countries in the region of Africa and Asia. The Afro-Asian region is working and cooperating despite a perceived irrelevance of the construct. The construct would definitely prove a useful political weapon at multilateral fora, given the numbers and the size of the economies of the countries in the regions, and also till it is synchronized with the needs of the major Asian powers that are already engaged with Africa. So the countries only need to look towards their common goals and perspective to realize the solidarity uh, in Africa and between Africa and Asia, the Afro-Asian spirit. There also is a greater chance for the construct being more effective due to the general acceptance of liberal political and economic principles in the region, because we have seen in the contemporary times and current times that United States, which used to be the propagator and propounder of the liberal, neoliberal political and economic policies, have gone regressive, and it has gone protectionist. And we have seen that a series of protectionist measures and developments have taken place in our own times. To contrary to that, we see that Afro-Asian spirit and the countries in the and Asia, African region and Asia advocate liberal economic and political policies, which gives a kind of hope to the world for further economic growth and development, and of course, avoid the conflict that uh, geopolitical conflicts by bridging the two sides economically and politically. So India's Africa policy independently, we can see that is in sync with Afro-Asian construct. We have analyzed these perspectives in the previous sections of the presentations. We now see that BRICS, G20, NDB, AIIB, and solidarity at the issue of climate change and the relevance of Afro-Asian Bandung spirit are realities which give strength to the global South agenda. So Bandung spirit is in the core of the Global South agenda. Of course, I would say it was the origin of the Global South agenda. However, the challenge in our own times is to address several issues with respect to the narratives of Asian and the Afro-Asian solidarity. And these narratives are challenged by the differences among the countries. But I would say that uh, the countries of the Global South have been wise enough to focus only on the uh, points and the issues and agenda that are of common benefit and have been putting the conflictual aspects at the sidelines. And of course, they are also trying to engage each other with respect to resolving those issues and uh, coming up with a kind of a common position on the issues that are relevant for the Global South. So Afro-Asian spirit is a kind of spirit which could be seen as the growth engine for future, whereby Asia and Africa largely contribute to the global economic growth and global geopolitical balance through the agenda of the Global South. That's it all that I wanted to say in my presentation. Thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to present my viewpoint. Thanks a lot.